Hey, welcome to Pretty Well. Do you want to get to the root causes of your health concerns? Do you find yourself Googling, why do I feel this way? And looking for solutions to feel great again? I'm Lisa Smith, and I too felt exhausted, achy, and like I was aging too quickly. I wanted to look and feel like myself again and spent way too much time and money going to practitioners, even functional medicine practitioners, and not getting results. So I became a functional medicine practitioner myself and learned how to identify and fix root causes to health issues. The good news is there is so much you can do to reclaim your wellness. In this podcast, you'll find quick, simple, and evidence-based guidance that you can easily fit into your day so your energy will be soaring, your mind clear, and your skin will return to its beautiful glow. Let's dive in. Hey, welcome back to the Pretty Well podcast. I'm Lisa Smith, and today you are going to love our guest. I'm talking with Jared St. Clair. Jared's an herbalist and an expert natural supplement formulator with over 30 years of experience running Vitality Nutrition. He's known for his Vital 5 essential supplements and has crafted highly effective formulas for health concerns from digestive issues to hormone imbalances, immune support, and even emotional wellness. He is the host of Vitality Radio Podcast, and Jared educates listeners on mastering natural supplements to thrive without pharmaceuticals, making him a leading voice in holistic health. Jared, I am excited to have you on today. Welcome to Pretty Well.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Anybody that's willing to let me talk about what I'm passionate about is a friend of mine.
I love it. Same here. So let's talk about why you're passionate about your journey. You've been in this natural health space for decades and you've seen lots of trends come and go. You've probably shifted your thoughts on some things, but what drew you into this line of work?
I got the most organic start you could possibly imagine in the natural products industry. My dad was in the industry before I was born, and he opened up a health food store with my mom when I was 5 years old. The store that I own now is that store. It's 48 years old now, and I literally started working here when I was a little boy. And I'm 53 years old now. I've owned the store for 31 years, but I started managing the store for my parents when I was 15. So I've been doing this for as long as I can remember. And my dad then continued. This was just a little side project. He wanted a place that his kids could work, teach us some work ethic, and also teach us some valuable lessons about health and nutrition. And then at the same time, I think, frankly, was looking to get a little better deal on his own supplements and foods. We started the store way back when. 1977 was a terrible time to start an independent health food store. Nobody cared about health food back then. And it was a journey, lots and lots of bumps along the way. It's shocking sometimes when I look back at what we went through in the early days that we're still here, but thriving now and doing really well. Still in the same town that he started in way back when. He went on to be the vice president for some of the biggest supplement companies in the world, Solaray, Mega Food, Nature's Herbs, brands like that, and stayed in the industry all along, and then started a company about 35 years ago called Ridgecrest Herbals that a lot of people are familiar with. So yeah, my bloodlines go deep in the supplement industry for sure.
I guess you literally grew up, it's in your blood.
Yeah,
So
very much so.
your dad was way ahead of his time back in the
Yeah.
70s to be bringing a health store to the market.
Yeah, I had weird parents, but in the very best way. Just amazing people. My dad was a visionary and didn't care all that much what everybody was doing around him or what they thought about what he was doing. He just did what he thought was the right thing to do. More often than not, he was on the right page. I'm grateful every day that I was raised the way I was and not treated with pharmaceuticals as a child and taught how to take care of myself naturally. It's a great blessing indeed.
Yeah, we definitely have some things in common. My granddad was a cancer surgeon, and we would visit him every Easter and Thanksgiving. His patients would bring the Thanksgiving turkey and the Easter ham and say, your grandfather saved my life or my wife's life or whomever. But when they would leave, he would turn to us and say, I would so much rather help these people prevent this horrible disease than try to heal them after. And he had in his kitchen this stack of supplements. He believed in nutrition and supplements as the way to live the healthiest life. He lived well into his 80s in perfect health the entire time. So there's
A
something to
pretty
it.
unique kind of doctor for sure. Yeah,
He was incredible. He's my hero. He was way ahead of his time, a lot like your dad. But
awesome.
he's who gave me a passion for what I do. When that lodged in my brain that you can actually help people prevent something like cancer, as a little kid, that was so impressionable on me. I thought, I'm going to help people live healthy lives. If you can do that, that's what I want to do.
Love
So
it.
tell me, gosh, you've learned so much over the years. You've seen so many fads and trends come and go.
Oh, indeed.
Tell me one of the biggest things you've learned about how the body actually heals itself.
Well, years ago, I realized that my philosophy had become just through working with people one on one. We're a unique kind of supplement store. We do a lot of nutritional counseling, a ton of education. I've had my podcast, Vitality Radio, now for 6 years, and I was on local radio on the Utah Jazz Radio Network for 12 years prior to becoming a podcaster. I was a local radio guy, and education is a big part of what we do. We get pretty deep with our customers on what's going on. The good thing about that is I've learned a lot about how the human body works from real people using real supplements to improve their health. And dawned on me one day, and I don't even know, this is probably at least 20 plus years ago, that there's really just two things that we have to focus on first when we talk about our health and how the body works in terms of optimizing health. There's figuring out what's in the body that needs to not be in the body, clogging up the works or creating a dam towards optimal health. And that can be all kinds of different toxins from parasites, mold, heavy metals, and these endocrine disrupting chemicals rampant in our society. We got to figure out what's in there that needs to come out and figure out how to get it out. And then we need to figure out what isn't in there that the body needs to actually optimally perform. And supplements, of course, can play a role in both places because we can detoxify with supplements and we can fortify with supplements. That being said, supplements are never the be all end all because diet is huge, movement is huge. The mindset side of all this is really big. One story I love to tell, and it's a longer story than we have time for today, but I'll give a very brief version of it, is my wife. She and I are pretty much newlyweds at this point. We haven't even hit our 2 year mark. We met about 8 years ago after both of us were coming out of a challenging divorce. We met online like people do nowadays and had a long conversation. During that conversation, she told me all kinds of things that were quote unquote wrong with her. Everything from health issues she was dealing with. She didn't get too much into the physical health stuff. I learned more about that later, but primarily mental health stuff. She had been put on Prozac as a child at 13 years old. Which, if you look at when Prozac was first launched, she was probably one of the first people on Prozac and had never come off of SSRI or mind altering pharmaceuticals other than for brief moments up until the time I met her 8 years ago. And she had adopted this philosophy or this belief that she was broken and couldn't be fixed. She could only be managed as far as her health goes. And I clearly don't believe that and never have believed that. And so I challenged that really early on, actually. I think it was maybe the second conversation that we had. I said, you know, you're not bipolar. And she said, yes, I am. And I said, well, no, you're not. She said, yes, I am. I have all the symptoms. I've been diagnosed. I'm on drugs that help me feel better. And I said, okay, I get that you've got symptoms of what they call bipolar, but you yourself are not bipolar, and you can't adopt that as part of your identity. And she thought I was nuts. And as we moved along in our relationship, which was an interesting relationship, because like I said, we've been married for almost 2 years. We met 8 years ago. We became the best of friends before we ever became romantic. And we still are just the most amazing friends in the world. But my belief the night that I met her was that she just needed to understand that her body could heal. She didn't believe it could heal because she grew up with a mother who was a Western medicine nurse. She grew up very tied to the medical model that we have here in America, which is, you know, treat symptoms and not treat root cause, and didn't believe that she could ever be off of those pharmaceuticals. One of the things that I told her pretty quickly is that, yeah, you could get off of those too, and you'll feel better when you're off of them than you are when you're on them. She says, no, that's not true. And a year and a half later, she wasn't on any pharmaceuticals anymore, and she wasn't dealing with very much of any of her symptoms that she had. She had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. They tried to diagnose her with lupus for a couple of times, but she didn't quite fit the criteria, but she had most of the symptoms of lupus. And she had pretty severe IBS. In fact, the first date that we went on, she couldn't eat her meal because it hurt so bad. And so I talked to her about how that's something else that we can fix. And anyway, fast forward now, she doesn't deal with any of those things. She's healthy. She's not on pharmaceuticals. She doesn't have any of those symptoms. She no longer believes she was ever a bipolar person. She had mental health challenges, but that's no longer part of her identity. It's amazing what happens when you isolate the things that need to get out and put back in the things that need to get in. The body responds, and it's a beautiful thing to see.
I bet that second date she was thinking, what am I doing? This guy's telling me. This is why they told me not to go online.
Well, the sad thing about it was is that she didn't want to go online. Her daughter-in-law actually convinced her to. I was the only guy she ever met online.
Oh,
And she's told me so many times. She just told me again last night. We were having a conversation. She said, I just knew from the very moment I met you that you were special and that I needed you in my life. And I felt the same way. Initially, I thought it was just because I was going to help her heal. I didn't know I was going to fall in love. It turned out to be way more than what I ever expected it to be. But there was something about us that was cosmic, I guess you could say, that we were in the right place at the right time for each other. She desperately needed my education on things. And my gosh, the stuff I needed from her that I didn't realize I needed at the time, pretty amazing as well. But on the nutrition side, that's where I came in handy. And it's been really cool to watch because she's now as diehard about natural and organic and clean and everything as I am. She's a avid supplement user. She actually helps me now with some of my formulations. It's a cool thing to come from someone who didn't believe any of it and now has been completely converted because it healed her. And we do, if anybody's interested, especially if you're listening and you feel a little stuck or maybe like you are a little broken as far as your own health or your mental health. Her story is called Jen's Story. It's on my podcast, Vitality Radio. There's actually 5 episodes because we go into deep detail of how she accomplished all this stuff and how she went from chronically ill for almost her entire life to healthy and thriving. So if anybody wants to hear that, it's a beautiful story.
that is the word that came to mind when you were telling this story, is that it's beautiful. And secondly, I will have that link in the show notes so people can go straight there. You mentioned something that I have found can be missing even in functional medicine, which is challenging because we think functional medicine is the answer, which is the nutrition, the supplements, the activity, the sleep, the stress management. But we tend to downplay the importance of mindset.
Oh, very much. And that's one whole episode of Jen's story is all about mindset. And she and I, so this is funny because you don't know what you don't know, right? And I have always been Mr. Positivity, Mr. Optimist, all that kind of stuff. But I was pretty stuck in some things too. And I didn't realize how stuck I was when I met her. I thought she needs a mindset shift, but I'm fine. Right? I mean, I just thought everything was fine. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't depressed,
You're
but I
positive.
had some stuff that was holding me back that she and I learned together how to get through. And one of those things was my podcast. I'd had a local radio show for 12 years. I'd been talking about launching a podcast for 5 years at that point. I recognize now that I didn't believe in my subconscious mind, or maybe a little bit in my conscious mind, that I was a national level voice. All right. I was good in the local market. I know now because I've examined it that I didn't believe that I was on the level that people would want to listen to me nationally or internationally. I was just going to be the guy on the radio in Utah where I'd had a ton of success. My podcast has been very successful. It blew up quite a bit, right? Not too long after I launched it. But I had to get my mindset wrapped around that before I was ready to actually do it. And frankly, had not been in the game in the way that it was when I launched it, I anticipate that my podcast wouldn't have been particularly successful either. I had to shift some of my own limiting beliefs. Jen and I, that was what was so beautiful about it. We recognized that she had limiting beliefs. And as we started working through hers, it was like, oh my gosh, so do I. I got to dig into this stuff too. We ended up doing that together, and it just made a world of difference for both of us.
You could exponentially both help each other heal because now you have this transparency and this realization, wow, we need each other. But it's so much easier to see someone else's limiting beliefs than our own. Let's unpack like a little deeper if you're comfortable with it. What were some of the roots of that limiting belief that I may be the statewide Utah voice, but not necessarily the national or international voice?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the questions, well, I'll be honest with you, some of it I've gotten past, and I'm not even sure what it was. There was some subconscious stuff that just doesn't seem to be there anymore. And I have much more confidence in my voice now than I did. Part of that, I'm sure, is just through doing, I've got almost 600 podcast episodes now, and I get very good reviews on the podcast. People like it. So that helps. You just seeing that people believe in me and like listening to me as a guest on their podcast, that sort of thing has been very beautiful. But I know that I had some imposter syndrome going on. I didn't realize it very clearly. I always thought I'd heard of that. I'd ask myself that question. Do I feel like an imposter? Do I actually feel like I belong? And I think I convinced myself consciously that I didn't have that, but subconsciously, for sure, I was dealing with that. And the way I know is because I was the guy who grew up in a health food store who helps people with all kinds of different things from urinary tract infections to hormonal imbalances and perimenopausal symptoms and low testosterone and you name the thing with supplementation. But you know what I don't have is I don't have an MD behind my name. I wasn't even a certified health coach. I was just a guy that grew up in a health food store. I happened to be a guy who spent a ton of his time educating on how to help people. So I don't feel like I'm not educated in the space. I'm not formally educated. And people would ask me all the time, are you a doctor? Are you a chiropractor? Are you a this or that or whatever? And I say, no, I dropped out of college the first year. I was I was going into marketing and I didn't like college. I dropped out and I just started doing this full time. I've worked with thousands of people with pretty significant issues. A lot of the people that sit down in front of me for a consult, they've already been to 5 doctors and haven't had success with whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. And they end up hearing about me from a friend, or maybe they hopped onto the radio or the podcast and found me there. I joke with these people all the time. I'm often the last resort, and that's fine with me as long as I get that opportunity to try and help. But yeah, I think that was a big one. I just thought, well, who's going to want to listen to a guy that, isn't a professional, isn't a practitioner or whatever else it is. But as I've done my thing, I've recognized that there's plenty of people that are interested in hearing what I have to say, which I'm extremely grateful for.
We all have that to some extent, whether we recognize it or not. Even if you had certain certifications, there's somebody who has a different one or a better one in our eyes.
Right.
It's a tricky mindset or limiting belief to wrap your brain around it, but we all have it for sure. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that vulnerability. We have our limiting beliefs. Like you said, some of them we don't even recognize. They have blinders on them. But once we're able to move past them, it's life-changing.
And that's the thing. Jen and I, my wife, we were so consumed with figuring out this mindset thing for a while because it was just so beautiful what was opening up to us and how we were feeling about ourselves, how we were feeling about each other, how we were feeling about ourselves as parents and business owner and all the different aspects of life that were really cool. We actually started teaching it, the mindset stuff. We learned it from a gentleman here in Utah. His name's Lamont Wilcox, who's a dear friend of mine. We actually got certified with him to teach what he does. And then we went even beyond that and started reading every mindset book we could and watching all the videos. We started teaching what we call emotional vitality. And what's interesting is we would do these classes in the back of our brick and mortar here in Utah. And we'd be lucky to get 8 or 10 people into a class. The most we ever had was 12. We're telling people this is the best stuff we have. We can sell you a supplement. We can tell you how to eat right. But if you can fix what's going on in your subconscious mind, if you can pull back the curtain and see what's going on in there, you can free yourself of so many things that are tying you down. And then everything we recommend is going to work better, or you're not even going to need some of it because you've already gotten past some of the things that were holding you back mentally and emotionally. We call that emotional vitality. It was hard to get somebody to come in. I could get somebody to come in and hear me talk about vitamins way easier. And I think what it boils down to that it's easy for us to grab a bottle and pop a pill. It's harder for us to dig in. What is it that I'm doing or not doing that's holding me back? That creates vulnerability, which is not everybody's comfortable with. I would dare say most people are not very comfortable with. And a lot of people don't necessarily want to see what's behind that curtain. Maybe it's a little dark and scary back there for a lot of people. I know it was, especially for Jen. She felt like she really had some demons back there that were holding her back. And a lot of people do. So we started just talking about it on the podcast. And so now we have 20 plus episodes called Emotional Vitality, where we talk about the reticular activating system and lots of different things, just tools and tricks that we've learned that have helped us to excel in areas that we used to struggle in. So anybody that's interested in this mindset stuff and is open to just spending some time listening, that's a good opportunity as well for anybody listening. If you're interested, it's free information, but it's priceless stuff. So highly recommend that too.
Okay, yeah. So we need to do another podcast in the future with all emotional vitality. So let's just commit today. We're going to do that
I'd love to do that.
because what I have learned, especially in the past years having my practice, we would get to the roots of the problems, the true roots. We'd figure out, as you mentioned, what do we need to remove? What's filling the toxin tub? And then what do we need to replace? And then how do we bring you to full vitality? And the majority of people, I would see the needle move so significantly. It was amazing. That's why I love what I do. It's so exciting. But there were some people, and we would make so much progress, and then it would go backward. And then we'd make so much progress again, and it would go backward. And I would beat my head against the wall thinking, what are we missing?
Mm-hmm.
But I've realized it's this mindset piece. And it's this piece of the demons, the traumas that we hold in our body, in our fascia, in our cells, in all our tissues, along with in our heart and our mind. But we've dealt with them as well as we could. So we get a little tricked and we think, oh, I already dealt with that. It's fine. But I have
Right.
this chronic low back pain and this fibromyalgia and this new diagnosis of another chronic condition. And that's when we know it, there's a cue there that there's more going on under the surface. Let's talk about the reticular activating system. It's so fun and interesting. And once, if you give the analogy of a car that you're shopping for, when people hear it, they'll say, oh, yeah, that happens to me. That's happened to me so many times. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, the RAS, the reticular activating system, should be taught in every grade from the time that a child is old enough to understand even just the most basic information, because it's the negative self-talk that creates a lot of these roadblocks for us. And it happens through this incredible system that I think we're blessed with if we feed it well. But unfortunately, life and our own selves, in many cases, are hijacking that system. The reticular activating system is a filter for the brain. And it's wild. I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but if you're driving down the interstate, picture you're driving your car and you've got billboards on both sides. You've got cars all around you, in front of you, and behind you in your rearview mirror. You're probably either having a conversation with whoever's in the car with you or listening to a podcast, music, or whatever. The amount of information coming into your brain is staggering. It's millions and millions of bits of information. Your brain has this little filter to try to filter down to just the stuff that is the very most necessary. And that is the reticular activating system. You get all the information, but most of it just goes straight to the subconscious mind. And only little bits of it are available to the conscious mind so that you can make the decisions that need to be made right now. Brain is essentially trying to help us out. One way that it does that is it puts us on autopilot. Oftentimes, I bet every single person who has a license has gone through this. They see where I'm at. We have 33rd South and 47th South and 53rd South are all consecutive exits. And I can tell you that I have missed every one of those exits, didn't even notice they were there. And all of a sudden I'm at the 72nd South exit. I drove past every one of them. I saw the signs. I'm sure subconsciously recognized those signs. And how in the world did I get all the way to 72nd South without running somebody off the road? Well, because my reticular activating system put my brain on autopilot, essentially. I know how to drive, maintain speed, stay in my lane, and my mind is drifting off somewhere else. Maybe it's focused on one of the billboards or the conversation that I'm having or the podcast I'm listening to. But I get there safe because my brain has thrown me into autopilot. It's amazing because it's how we never forget how to ride a bike or tie our shoes. If you can imagine having to remember or how to learn how to tie your shoe every single time you tie your shoe for the rest of your life, it'd be a pretty unproductive life, right? So our body can do this autopilot thing and it does it really well. But autopilot can take us a couple of different directions. In my wife's case, her autopilot was taking her to depression and anxiety. And we say something that most people don't say. Some people don't like it when we say it. It sounds negative in some people's ears, but we believe that anxiety and depression are largely habits, a way that our brain is wired to go, because that's where we've always been. If you think about depression, for instance, I have a story that I'll tell about my wife. It's pretty universal because we've told this a lot of times and we see people's heads nodding in agreement. When she would start to get depressed because something went wrong, right? Something went wrong with work, or she had a struggle with her ex or her children or whatever it was, and she started to sink into that depressed state, she would go into what we call her depression blanket. So she'd put on a playlist that was sad and morose music. She had this one particular musical. She's a big Broadway fan that she'd put on. Anybody that's a Broadway fan and has heard of the show Next to Normal, it's one of the most depressing Broadway shows you can imagine. And she would listen to that music and it would put her into this cocoon of depression. It was this comfortable, uncomfortable place because it felt safe, but it would dig her deeper into where she, well, didn't consciously think she wanted to be, but subconsciously her brain was wired to take her there because that's where she had always taken it. The brain has a reward system, and the reward system is wild because it doesn't always feel rewarding. It's all based on neurotransmitters, and what we have trained our brain is where we want to be. For the gambler that is an addicted gambler and takes his paycheck on Friday and goes to the casino and blows his paycheck, he's done that 50 times. He knows what's likely going to happen, and yet he does it anyway. Why does he do it anyway? Because his brain is actually convinced that that's what he wants. He actually wants to feel the pain of losing that money and not being able to figure out how to pay his rent that month, or having to tell his spouse that he did it again, or whatever it is. And that all comes from what we call maps that we've built in our minds. A lot of that starts with the reticular activating system and what we tell ourselves. As I was mentioning way back when I first started talking about Jen, she introduced herself. It was like she was raising her hand in an AA meeting. I'm Jen and I'm bipolar. Well, no, you're not bipolar. You struggle with bipolar symptoms, but as long as you keep telling yourself that you're bipolar, guess who believes it? Your subconscious mind believes it, because you've taught your reticular activating system, this is who I am. This is what I am. I am a broken person. I can't get out of this. But as soon as you start to flip the script and stop calling yourself that thing, your subconscious mind will actually start to believe differently about you. And now when I ask her, because I still ask her every so often, especially if we're speaking together, I'll ask her, what does it feel like now when you look back at how you felt about yourself back then? And she says, it feels like I was a completely different person. I don't even recognize that version of me anymore. Well, why doesn't she recognize it? Because her brain can't even see that in her anymore. Her brain sees a completely different version of Jen. She's the same person, but she believes completely different about who she is, what she is, and whether or not she's well or sick. And that is all within her control.
Yes. I love how you put that in a framework and brought Jen's story in to really illustrate that. That reticular activating system, I like the illustration too, Jared, of if you're choosing to buy a new car and you've decided to buy a red Volvo, you see so many red Volvos on the road and you're like, wait, did everyone just start buying red Volvos? But they didn't. It's just your brain. As you said, there are so many millions of bits of information that our brain focuses. It says, okay, from this person, this is important. And it leaves all the rest of them, as you said, it will put them in the subconscious to just get rid of them. So when Jen stops saying, my identity is as a bipolar person who's subject to depression and anxiety and all these chronic health issues, and you helped her to break that thinking and say, let's put new information into your reticular activating system. You can have those tendencies, but when she saw that differently, now her RAS could say, oh, my focus was over here, but now I can let that go. My focus is now here. And the beauty for all of us is we can all do that.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing. We all have control of what we focus on, right? And in your life, you have people who are generally negative. or generally positive. Every one of us has those people. And you're one of those people on one side or the other, probably tend to be a little more cup half full or cup half empty. I actually believe, and I'd be curious what you think about this, Lisa, that we're kind of wired that way, probably from birth. And that actually comes from how our parents were. We know that the first 7 years of life, we're essentially wired to be those maps that I was talking about are put there. They're not put there by us. They're put there by our parents, school teachers, friends, family members. We have a certain way of believing and reacting because we're taught to do that by just soaking up what's modeled to us by all these people. Most of these people are trying to do what's best for us. So it's not really their fault per se. They have their own maps and issues, their own blind spots and their own reticular activating system and all this stuff. At that point, we're already kind of mapped into a certain direction. It's happening even before we're born. There's pretty good research on what happens in the womb with your brain and the kind of energy that you experience from your mom and whoever is surrounding her while you're in gestation. It's pretty incredible what's happening there. So when you look at how the brain is this really malleable thing, and you look at how you tend to look at life, I was the guy with the cup half full. In fact, I was more the guy with the cup almost overfilled. I just always felt that way about life. And Jen was always, you know what she would say to me? She'd say, I never want to get too excited because I'm so scared of disappointment. And whenever I get excited about stuff, it almost always goes wrong. The question is that true? Or does she just believe that that's true because she puts such heavy focus on what did go wrong and not what did go right? Because most of us in America can look at life and say, we've got it better than a lot of people financially and in terms of technological advances. There's places in this world where people still can't find food. Heck, there's places in America where people still can't find food. And so if you're capable of listening to a podcast, you're better off than a lot of people, right? And yet some of us are looking at it and saying, whether it's a comparison game we're playing, and we tend to focus on those things that aren't going our way. One of the things I did with Jen, and I do with my children and with anybody that'll listen to me, is I ask people to just watch their mouths, pay really close attention to what you're actually saying and what kind of energy is coming from that. Your mouth and your thoughts are really what is guiding those maps inside your head. For the most part, they're just going to keep going to where they've always been. We have to figure out how to reroute them, which means we have to make a change. So one thing we've changed in our vernacular is that we don't use the word hard ever. We don't use it for a challenge that comes up. If we're going to take a hike, my wife is the most avid hiker in the world, and she takes me to all the mountains. When we take a hike, we never talk about if it's a hard hike. We talk about it as a challenge. What's a challenge? A challenge is something to be overcome. When you accept the challenge and win, there's a reward on the other end of it. Hard is just hard. So why use words like that when we can use words like challenge? And when you start to shift and start to use little shifts like that, it makes a big, big difference. I know it sounds simple, but it's almost foreign now for me to say something is hard. It's always a challenge. I came back from a trip 2 days ago and I didn't feel good. I didn't sleep well. You can probably still hear I've got a little bit of a congestion in my head here. And because we were just drive for like 6 days straight and you know, hotel rooms and all that kind of stuff. My store manager texted me and he said, so, you know, how was your night? And I said, it was challenging, but I'll be fine. Right. And I just realized now that that's just not a word anymore. And when hard isn't a word, then everything is doable. It's not so hard we can't do it. It's just a challenge that we have to overcome. So lots of those types of things can really, really make shifts that sound simple, but I promise you is powerful.
Very powerful. Just catching some of the words we say to ourselves. A lot of times we say things to ourselves we would not even dream of saying to another human being. They're so critical and condemning. And to catch those is life-changing. To catch those and change them and speak to ourselves with grace and compassion, it's life-changing for sure. There was so much you spoke about that is really important, not just how we talk to ourselves, how we view things. Let's switch a little bit. I do want us to have a follow-up where we just talk emotional vitality. We dissect it, we start foundationally, build on it. But let's now switch a little bit because you own a supplement store and line. Let's talk about that. So many people, I found this too, they're trying so hard to feel better that they will buy anything that's advertised that is marketed well. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had people come in, sit across the desk from me, Jared, and they literally had a shopping bag full of supplements. And
Yeah.
this is what I'm taking. What do you think? Usually I was like, well, this one's good. And then we just, like the rest of them, forget it. Talk to us about you have something that you call the Vital Five. Let's go there.
Yeah, so I started off on local radio, and being on radio is interesting because I was on the Utah Jazz Radio Network. So it's all sports all the time, except for 1 hour on Saturday morning of me and 1 hour of a guy talking about cars. Everything else on that station, 7 days a week, is sports. And anytime that somebody tuned into my show, it was an accident. They already had it on. They were listening to the game the night before. They turn on their car in the morning, and there's some guy talking about vitamins. The cool
Yes.
thing is kind of like a sneak attack. I got a bunch of people that otherwise would have never probably tuned into a podcast that was talking about this. One of my favorite customers, he's become a friend of mine. He said, I never would have stepped foot in a health food store if I hadn't heard you on the radio. And now he and his wife are regulars, and we've helped him a lot with a lot of things. So the reason I bring that up is because I got a lot of rookies, a lot of people listening to the show that had never been in a health food store, had never taken a multivitamin, didn't know where to start. And even people who aren't rookies per se and maybe have a cabinet full of vitamins, it can be really overwhelming, right? Because you look at just in my store alone, we have almost 5,000 different products. So you walk into a store like mine and you're like, okay, now what? Where do I start? And
Right.
how do I know not just what brand, but do I need omega-3? Do I need probiotics? What do I need?
Yes.
So then we end up in America, we've been trained, I think, and this is a very big mistake, to put our health into the hands of somebody else. For the most part, it's somebody in a white coat, a doctor that's got a degree or diploma up on the wall that says that he or she went to medical school. But sometimes it's also somebody who might be a health coach, or podcaster, a dietitian, a herbalist, or a homeopath. I think it's a mistake to ever put your health fully in the hands of anybody else other than yourself, because it is your health, right? You are in charge of that. So first we have to take back our own authority. And then we use people who we've determined that we can trust to help us with that. People like Lisa, hopefully people like myself, you find a good MD that can be helpful, or a good nutritionist, or whatever it is. But the journey is your journey, and nobody cares as much about your health as you do, or at least they shouldn't. Nobody should care more about it than you do. But the reason I say all that is because we're in this world where we're looking for quick fixes. We're looking for somebody else to tell us what to do. So we hear the influencer on the podcast say, yeah, we've got this green food powder that you should take because I take it. Or we've got this multivitamin that you should take because I take it. Or we've got this colostrum supplement that you should take because I take it. And maybe that person really does take it, and maybe they really believe in it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing for you, right? And nothing is right for everybody. But the big question that I get asked all the time is, where do I start? If I'm buying in, I think supplements are good, then what? What do I do now? Years ago, I came up with my Vital Five, and it wasn't going to be called the Vital Five, and it wasn't even going to be 5 things. I didn't know what it was going to be. I just needed an answer for people that was as universal an answer as I could come up with. People would say, where do I start? And I'd think, okay, the average American is dealing with these deficiencies and issues. So let's come up with a universal list for men and women, adults in America. Pretty safely, these 5 things make sense for them. I didn't start off with 5. I just ended up with 5 because that was what I determined made sense. So we have a great multivitamin. I always say a great in front of multivitamin, because I think most multivitamins are not great. In fact, I would dare say most multivitamins you're probably actually better off without, because the quality is so poor. One of my favorite episodes of my podcast is called Centrum Sucks. Because
it's so true.
It's a simple statement, but it's 100% accurate. And this is a multivitamin brought to you by Pfizer. This is not a product that we should be putting in our mouths. And yet it's the number one selling multivitamin in the world because they have a lot of money to market it and people buy in. And there are some really great multivitamins. And the reason a multivitamin makes a ton of sense is because there are just so many little gaps in our diets. We could have a conversation sometime about how to pick a great multivitamin. I developed one called Ultimate Vitality Multi. That's the one that we recommend. There are lots of good ones. You're going to find good multivitamins in a functional medicine practitioner's office or a health store, not so much in a mass market store, Costco, Walmart, places like that. The next thing that would be on the list, and these are in no particular order, are omega-3. The vast majority of Americans are not eating much seafood. Most of us are very deficient in omega-3 for two reasons. We're not eating enough, but we also are eating too many omega-6s, and we need to have a balance between omega-3 and omega-6. And supplementing omega-3 to me makes the most sense simply because it's fairly difficult to get it any other way. Wild caught Alaskan salmon is kind of the last frontier of really good, clean omega-3. And if you want to eat that, absolutely eat it. It's great, but it's expensive. Not everybody even likes salmon. And by the time you are paying for 2 or 3 salmon fillets a week, which is what you would need, about 3 7-ounce fillets is what's been determined would be enough omega-3 for the average American. You can do that much more economically with supplements. So omega-3 often makes sense there. Number 3 would be magnesium. And I'm a big proponent of magnesium bisglycinate being what I consider to be the most universal magnesium. That's not to say that other forms don't have benefits. They certainly do. And there's the number one selling magnesium in the world right now, as far as I know anyway. It has 7 different kinds of magnesium in it. I won't call it out by name, but it has 7 different kinds of magnesium. And their marketing says you need 7 kinds of magnesium. Well, that's simply not true. Your body needs magnesium. It needs to be able to absorb the magnesium. So you just need a source that's highly absorbable. And magnesium bisglycinate, according to the research studies, is the most bioavailable form for human nutrition and also the easiest on the stomach. So I always recommend that form for the universal list. Sometimes I'll recommend other forms for individual people.
Right.
And if you're interested in figuring that out, some of the things that people like about my podcast, it's very supplement oriented. We have an episode called Your Magnesium User's Guide, where we go through each individual form of magnesium, why you might want to choose one versus another. We have a lot of that kind of stuff on Vitality Radio. Number 4 would be probiotics. Probiotics are interesting because technically you don't always need to be supplementing a probiotic. I was raised very differently. My first antibiotic that I ever had was when I was 45 years old, because my parents knew how to take care of things without antibiotics. And I wouldn't have had that antibiotic, except I had a surgical procedure and they wouldn't let me out of it. And one of the reasons I think my wife was so sick is she had chronic ear infections as a child and was on antibiotics chronically, and it wrecked her gut, which then wrecked her brain for the reasons that happens. So most of us are under attack or have been under attack with antibiotics. But even still, if let's just say you haven't had an antibiotic for 10 years or 15 years, you've kind of figured this out, you're taking good care of yourself, you don't resort to these every time you get a sore throat or whatever. Well, you're still getting antibiotics in meat. 70% of the antibiotics made in America are fed to animals that are then fed to us. Unless we're eating really clean meat, we're getting antibiotics there. And then there's this nasty chemical called glyphosate, which is a human antibiotic, the stuff that's in Roundup. If we're not eating organic fruits and veggies and grains, we're getting antibiotics there. Antibiotics are there all the time, and our microbiome is being hammered all the time. So I do think probiotics on a regular basis make a lot of sense. I'm a big believer in spore forming probiotics as my favorite type of probiotics. Again, if you want more information on that, I have a show that is called The Great Debate, which talks about spores versus human strains and why you might want one versus the other, because I'm not opposed to human probiotics. I love them for certain things, but spores are my favorite. And the last thing is digestive enzymes. I believe that most of us, by the time we hit our 30s, are very deficient in digestive enzymes, which means we're breaking down less of our food, getting less nutrition out of our food, creating more stress in the gut, which creates all kinds of different things, everything from IBS to even worse conditions. And digestive enzymes help to assist with energy because we're expending less energy digesting our food if we have enough enzymes. If you're not very familiar with enzymes, that's the thing in the Vital 5 that always surprises them, that it's on the list. But digestive enzymes are on the list because I feel better when I take enzymes than I don't. And almost every time that I recommend enzymes that you take with each meal, people feel better. They have more energy. They have less gassiness and bloating. In fact, the first supplement that I recommended to my wife was a digestive enzyme and probiotic that I developed years ago called Back on Track. She wouldn't eat her meal on our first date. I said, "Okay, let me give you this stuff. Try it next time you eat." And she tried it the next time she ate. She texted me the next day after lunch and she said, Jared, this is the first meal I've eaten in years that didn't hurt. I always tell people that was better than a wedding ring. That worked out really exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, that's the Vital Five. People often ask if I think vitamin D should be in the Vital Five. If you get a really great multivitamin, there's typically vitamin D and vitamin K2 in there as well. So I don't include that as a thing.
Yeah, we're on the same track with your Vital Five. I don't have a name for it like yours, but very much on the same track. This is really interesting. As people continue to age, their 70s and beyond, they lose their appetite.
Yes.
I am convinced that's because they've lost enzyme function. So their body in its wisdom knows, I can't digest this. It's causing me more harm than good. I just don't want it.
Yeah, a lot of them don't have a gallbladder. Most of them are underproducing stomach acid, and they're definitely underproducing enzymes. So the body's like, how am I supposed to break this stuff down? Yeah, I totally agree.
We see older people say, oh, I don't want that. Well, there's a reason for that. The body is smart enough to say, I can't deal with that. Enzymes are a surprising one for people once you say it, but they're life-changing, just like for your wife, Jen.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't go anywhere without Back on Track. It's our favorite product. This is one I actually developed. I have a story on my podcast that I tell about, I grew up in a health food store. I didn't always listen to what my parents told me because I was still a kid, and I caused myself a lot of digestive distress as a young man, to the point where I had severe acid reflux issues when I was 25 years old. I built Back on Track, TRACT, like digestive tract, based on my experience of healing my digestive issues when I was a younger man. I'm 27 years without acid reflux now. I had one of the worst cases that my GI doc at the time had ever seen, and was in a bad way. I realized just how valuable probiotics and digestive enzymes can be for that, but also everything that has to do with digestion. It's just incredible how critical the enzymes really are.
And then we see people's energy go through the roof because they're finally getting the nutrients in their food and using them.
Yeah. And expending less energy digesting their food. The brain and the gut use up the vast majority of the energy stores in the body. If we give our gut the assistance that it needs in breaking down our food, ask yourself this question. If you ever eat lunch and you're like, oh my gosh, I need a nap, you're deficient in digestive enzymes. Take a couple of enzymes with that next meal, and I will not be surprised at all if you say, wow, I feel good after this one. It's not always gassiness and bloating, constipation, or things like that. Those are the more obvious digestive issues, but fatigue, especially after a meal, is a big indicator that we're probably not digesting our food very efficiently.
Well, we could go on and on. So we'll have to have another episode together. This has been so much fun. There's so many other things to talk about in addition to emotional vitality. We could talk about hormone health and chronic issues, but we will definitely have a next time and talk about those things as well.
I would love to do it. You've been a pleasure and a great host. I appreciate you letting me tell my stories.
Thanks, Jared. Is there anything you want to leave our listeners with as we wrap up?
Well, I'll tell you, the biggest thing I would say, because we've gone a lot of different directions, but more often than not, people point to me as the guy that can help them figure out how to take supplements correctly. That's a niche that I've carved out for myself. And the big takeaway that I hope people take is that there is education out there on how to do this correctly. We do have to be cautious because everybody's got a bias. I manufacture supplements and sell them and educate on them. So obviously, I would love for you to buy supplements from me. And so would the guy on the other podcast that's talking about the brand of product that pays him to talk about the brand of product he's talking about, right? We have to be aware that everybody has an angle. And that doesn't mean everybody's lying to you. I would anticipate that the majority of people that are saying, hey, I think you should take this supplement, probably believe what they're saying, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing for you. So it behooves us to educate ourselves on this. I hope that in the conversation we've had today, I have given you a little bit on that. We spent a lot of time on the mental side of it, which is frankly my favorite thing to talk about. So I'm not sad about that at all. But on the supplement end of things, if you're really looking and trying to figure out, okay, how do I tell if this is the right vitamin for me? How do I tell if this is the right herbal formula for me, or enzyme or whatever? I would love for you to test out the Vitality Radio podcast and jump over there. We have episodes on just magnesium, episodes on just probiotics. What I believe I bring to the table is someone who's seen it from every different angle. I've sold the supplements that other companies make. I've manufactured my own supplements. I've been on the raw material side to see what actually goes into these products. I've seen it from every angle. I'm able to help you see through some of the marketing smoke screens and see things for what they are, and then you get to decide what you want to do with it. But we'd love to have you over. If you'd like, Lisa, I'll give you a couple of links to some good starter episodes that people might enjoy for this kind of thing. Take back control of your health and find people that you trust to help you with it. You're not on your own, but it is your ultimate responsibility. And the best way to do that is to educate yourself.
I love that your message, Jared, is that at the end of the day, we need to not leave our common sense at home, and we need to take our health into our own hands, because nobody knows. You mentioned nobody cares as much about our health, but also nobody knows our body the way we know it.
Yeah, sure.
So definitely I'll have the links in the show notes to your podcast and your website. And if you want to give a couple of links to specific episodes, that might be really helpful. We really covered the map today, just in wellness in general. I loved all the things we talked about. So thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to our next time together.
I do as well. Thank you.
Okay, guys, thanks for joining in today. I love it when you come week after week, and I'll look forward to talking with you next week. Until then, stay pretty well. Bye.